In the last 20 days, Prime Minister Narendra Modi inaugurated several new metro corridors across the country. The last of the north-south corridor of Lucknow Metro, the Dilshad Garden Ghaziabad Metro route, a Noida City Centre Electronic City route for NCR. He also flagged off the first runs of the Ahmedabad Metro, the Nagpur Metro, and also green signal the building of metro networks for Patna, Kanpur and Agra. Plus 3 more corridors for Delhi Metro. Now that's a hefty financial commitment. And the big question is, are these all sensible, viable decisions? Yes, we need green, clean mobility for our rapidly growing cities. Metros can change the very face of a city, also make life fantastic for its citizens. But does that automatically mean that we must have larger metro networks across the country? Today on Urban Reality, that's the answer we will seek from our panel of experts. Joining me today, Jagan Shah, Director of National Institute of Urban Affairs. Also with me, Elias George, Chairman and CEO of Infrastructure, Government and Healthcare at KPMG India. Shreya Gadapalli, she's the Urban Mobility Expert and South Asia Director at the Institute for Transportation and Development Policy. And APM Mohammad Hanish, Managing Director, Kochi Metro Rail Limited. Gentlemen and Shreya, thank you very much for joining me. Jagan Shah, you're here right next to the government, so I'm going to ask you, what was this about Kanpur and Agra? I mean, there was a policy in 2015 which said 50 cities metro. By the time the government came to 2017, they realized that a metro is not viable in all cities. So they said, we have to look at viability. We have to make sure that, there is a possibility of a PPP. And yet we've looked at something like Kanpur and Agra for metro network. Seems to me that it's a policy flip-flop.
I wouldn't call it a policy flip-flop, Manisha. I think it's a mixed bag of concerns that leads to the creation of a metro line. And here we are only talking about some kilometers of line. Number one, we have to deal with the aspirational aspect of this. Given the fact that the policy insists that state governments actually have stake and substantial stake, 50% stake in these metro lines, or in the case of Hyderabad or Kochi, we have private sector funding coming in as well. Given that they have to make these substantial investments, clearly these are not impolitic as such. They are part of serving the aspirations of people, and as stimulus or seed funding for new public transport paradigms, really. Metro lines can trigger transformation, for instance. I believe that in a city like Kanpur, where the industrial economy has completely sort of dwindled, the shift to a new type of economy in that city may well be triggered by a metro line. Now, one might say that why only a few kilometers of metro line? But nevertheless, these are important because not only...
So you're saying that it's also an aspirational aspect that the government has to look at. I'm not debating that. What I'm saying is, then why have a policy which says very differently? Elias George, so we say in 2017, we want to consider metro as the last option, implement metro only after considering another mass rapid transport system, and argument was centers that cost of construction metro rail is very high. Now, none of those parameters have changed today. So was it a hustle and bustle and of elections coming? What was it? I mean, it took everybody by surprise.
One thing we got to realize, Manisha, is that out of about 200 metros in the world, only about 7 or 8 make profit like Hong Kong Metro. So basically, financial metrics are not the yardsticks by which a metro's got to be measured. Still, every city worth its name in this world wants to go in for a metro rail. And the policy speaks about various options, I agree. But basically, if you look at the policy very closely, it is the economic rate of return which has been sort of highlighted in it. And my sense is that if the city has got an appetite for a metro, we should, bend over backwards to make that happen, because so many other benefits will come into a city: higher investment, higher visibility, better quality of life for the people, safer commute for women, realty prices shooting up. So the net, the entire benefits to a city are much more than can be measured by what are the balance sheet of a metro rail company. And Kochi has sort of proving it. Probably it will be the first metro in the country to turn around in terms of a profit. So basically, you must go to the tier 2 cities, and if the city has got an appetite for a metro, I would say go for it.
Okay. Shreya Gadapalli, would you believe? Then why not just go back to our first stated mission, which was metro in 50 cities? That's where we are headed back.
Absolutely. And, I'm going to make a slightly controversial statement here. And I'd like to say that metros are really expensive construction projects in India. Because if there were public transportation projects, they should show in terms of what they're delivering in terms of public transportation. Now, if you have a fairly high demand, and metros are meant to be high demand transit systems, they should be serving high demand. But even in a city like Delhi, which has such an extensive metro rail network, the average ridership per kilometer built is only of the order of about 7,500 passengers per kilometer. Now compare that to the best in the world, whether it's in China or Japan or Hong Kong or even some of the European cities. They have anywhere between 20 to 30,000 passengers per kilometer built. So obviously it's not serving. And now Delhi is the best case scenario in India. Look at cities like Chennai, which are doing about 1,000 passengers per kilometer built. It's just abnormal in that sense that we are trying to do this now in smaller cities like Agra or Kanpur, which barely have any bus services in the city to start with. The same goes for even Lucknow and Jaipur, which have metros, but more or less no buses. And in addition, these metro lines have been built along with elevated roads right underneath the metro line, which is also quite counterintuitive, because what would you want if you want people really to shift to public transportation? You don't build a piece of car infrastructure right underneath the metro line. So net on net, I think it's an issue. We really need to be concerned about it. And I completely agree that public transportation needs to be subsidized, but then how much is the question? So Chennai presently subsidizes its passengers every trip by around 500 rupees, a little over 500 rupees per trip. It's in a very bad state. Even if it gets really even if it gets better, it comes to the state of, say, like Delhi or Bangalore, it would still subsidize each trip by 80 to 100 rupees. Now, the same city doesn't have enough money to subsidize bus services. Chennai bus services are subsidized to the order of 2 rupees. Other cities don't even subsidize that much. And we constantly crib about subsidizing public transportation when it comes to a bus. But we are very happy to put money on a metro. So I would say metros are construction projects and we are missing the bus.
So subsidized, but how much? And I think you've raised some very, very important points. Let me find out. I mean, Kochi is one of the best run metros right now. Its ridership has been going up every month. Their non-ticket revenues also are slightly more robust than other cities, is what I've been told. Mr. Hanish, would you agree? I mean, run us through the figure of how much were you subsidizing per passenger when you started the metro 3.5 years ago, and where have you reached today? For us to get a sense on whether we can at least bridge that large gap or a huge gap over the years.
In fact, we started off in 2017 June. And the ticket rates haven't changed after that. What we have done is we have been trying to bridge the gap between the income and expenditure on a daily basis. Now, when we started off in 2017, we had a gap of around 20 lakh rupees between income and expenditure. Non-ticketing revenue was the answer to it. Today, we can very well state that. In fact, in terms of the bridge between the gap between the income and expenditure, it has narrowed down to almost 11 lakhs to 12 lakh rupees. In another 10 or 12 months, when new lines are getting commissioned, we should be able to ultimately bridge the gap. So there was no question of subsidy in the proper sense of the term. We, in fact, from 10 rupees to 50 rupees has been the range of the ticketing. And along with this ticketing revenue, the non-ticketing revenue or the non-fare box revenue also has to play an important part. So the growth has been robust. We have been having great increase in terms of the ridership. And with the extensions being sought to be commissioned in the next 3 or 4 months, we should be having something close to 60,000 persons per day in terms of commuting traffic, commuters for traffic. So that's what we look forward to.
Okay.
And we also have new, there's a phase 2 getting ready for, construction work immediately, say after 1 or 2 months after elections. So that would take us forward in our trip towards self-sufficiency and self-reliance.
Well, that will be, I think, India's first, isn't it, Jagan Shah, that, you know, Kochi probably then has outperformed even Delhi. Our gap, I mean, we are way away from being financial or break even on Delhi Metro. And if I look at the cost, I mean, of whether it's a BRT per kilometer, it's as low as 10 crore per kilometer versus 200 crore for a metro station. Kochi might be one of the examples which is positive, but we have many failed examples. You have Jaipur, you have Lucknow, where ridership is nowhere close to what was projected, and the financial gap is just increasing by the year.
Well, you know, I think this is not the first time that we are, in a sense, experimenting with a new paradigm for dealing with our cities. I can't disagree with Shreya when she says, well, we should preference bus systems before we you look at metro systems. But I don't think it's possible for us in transportation in cities for us to really privilege any one mode as such. There needs to be
but
a mix of...
at least have a balance, Mr. Shah, because here you have Agra and Kanpur which don't even have proper bus systems.
I agree with you, Manisha. There can be a balance, but then factor in the costs of developing railway systems as well as airports. Why are we not asking this question about, you know, the Udan scheme, for instance? Because we are happy to accept. Well, we seem to be happy to accept the basic premise, which is that greater connectivity is important and we must invest in it. And these are large amounts of money, lumpy investments going into airports and flying aeroplanes between different centers. So my point really is that you need to actually come to grips with the integrated multimodal needs of our cities. And our diversity in terms of our existing modes of transportation is enormous and probably unequaled by any other country. And we are trying to make a transition. And when you make transitions, you need to look at scenarios which integrate all these different factors. So I think sort of rupee to rupee comparison, kilometer to
Let's not look at it.
It helps. It helps to get a grip on it. But I don't think it gives us final answers where policy then can be directed. I think the policy is robust. In 2006, when we brought out the NUTP, the National Urban Transport Policy, we said public transport has to be foregrounded. Now, it's taken us quite some time for public transport to become a public conversation.
Totally.
So all of this, I believe, while there are costs involved, and of course one can question the costs, are part of the evolution of a response to the urbanization in our country. And I think aspirations play a role, viability plays a role as well. However, I don't think we can write them off. Even the Jaipur Metro, and I know Jaipur well because I've worked there, even the Jaipur Metro may well be able to recover itself. You know?
Well, CAG said 2025. It was just too early. I mean, so that's the question. Elias George, so you talked about internal rate of returns. Now, there's a financial internal rate of return at 8%, which has now been moved by the policy to an economic internal rate of return of 14%. My question is that we all know that ticketing price or in a cost-sensitive country like India, ticket pricing will have to remain very, very sensitive. We will have to monetize through a TOD or value capture financing. But that aspect simply hasn't taken off. Maybe Kochi has got it right. But look at Delhi. We still don't have a robust TOD or a VCF model at all to make money outside of ticketing.
See, one of the things we learned in Kochi Metro, and Hanish will bear me out, is the fact that you have to be very innovative in finding out non-ticketing revenue sources. And one of the lessons we learned is you have to spend a lot of time on the brand equity of the metro, on the way it's positioned in the public mind, and the aesthetics and the beauty of the stations, the coaches and the entire line. I recall that in Kochi, in a small city like Kochi, one station gave us 6 crores in advertising revenue per year, which is a lot of money for the city. And if I recall, nearly half the revenues of Kochi come from non-ticketing sources. And that's a way to go. Another thing which I want to mention when you discuss the cost benefits of metros is the fact that of the central challenges of Indian cities, the top 5, one of them would be how to migrate people from cars into public transport. And building a metro in a city is a great opportunity to do this kind of transition change, this paradigm shift. Because what will happen is there's going to be a lot of disruption when the metro is built. And that disruption is an opportunity to re-engineer the entire public transport system by bringing in the buses, the metro into a common kind of a single axis with a central ticketing with the consumer as the central node. Basically a customer-focused public transportation system which is what cities like Kochi and many other smaller towns are trying to do in India today.
All right, so when we come back, let's focus on this last mile connectivity and even multimodal networks that you're talking about. Kochi might have got it right, but how do we get it right for other cities which have done, their metro network in silos? Delhi, for example, hasn't really borne out to that thing that Mr. George spoke about. You have metro, you have private vehicles going down and people actually shifting to public transportation. I think since we've had a metro and metro expanding rapidly, the number of private vehicles on the roads are not going down. Why is that?